She looked at me like I was a dream she never dared to believe was real. And in that moment, everything changed. The day was ordinary, just another blur of faces and footsteps in the city's endless rhythm. I was walking down the crowded street, lost in my own thoughts, when suddenly, something, or rather someone, pulled me out of that haze. She was standing near a small bookshop window, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow on her. There was a grace about her that caught my eye immediately, calm and confident, yet something quietly vulnerable lingered in the way her shoulders curved, as if she carried a gentle weight. Her hair caught the light, soft strands brushing against her collarbone, and I caught the faint scent of jasmine in the air around her. Our eyes met before either of us could look away. She looked at me as if I was something unreal, like a mirage caught between hope and disbelief. It wasn't just surprise. There was something deeper, like recognition or maybe longing. Her gaze held a delicate fragility, as if she had been waiting for something she never quite dared to name until that very instant. For a moment, time slowed. The noise of the street, the chatter, the cars, the distant hum of the city, faded into a quiet background hum. All I could feel was the steady warmth of her eyes on me. There was an unspoken question in that look, one that reached through the spaces between us and stirred something deep inside. I noticed how her breath caught slightly, a subtle pause like the world itself was holding its breath. She shifted just a little, her fingers tightening lightly on the strap of her bag, and I felt a flutter in my chest, a mixture of curiosity, hope, and an unfamiliar tenderness. There was no rush, no frantic pull, just that quiet moment where two people connect across the void of strangers. It was a fleeting moment, a brief crossing of paths, but it held the weight of something significant, something that whispered promises without words. Her lips parted ever so slightly, as if to say something, but no words came. Instead, she offered me a small, almost hesitant smile that held both invitation and hesitation. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance between us, but I held back, sensing that this was just the beginning of something that needed to unfold slowly. As we parted, I glanced back once, catching her watching me with that same look, eyes wide, heart slightly trembling, like I was a secret she had finally found in the chaos of the world. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition of something rare and fragile, a feeling that neither of us was quite ready to name yet. That first glance stayed with me long after she disappeared into the crowd. An unspoken promise that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of a story neither of us saw coming but a few days after that unforgettable glance. Fate, or maybe chance, pulled us together again. I didn't expect to see her, especially not in such a quiet, unassuming place. A small, cozy cafe tucked away from the city's noise. The kind of place where the scent of freshly ground coffee lingers in the air, and soft jazz plays just loud enough to fill the spaces between conversations. She was sitting alone at a corner table, a book open in front of her, but her eyes seemed distant, like she was reading more than just words on a page. When I stepped inside, her gaze flickered up, and for a heartbeat, that same disbelief and wonder shone in her eyes, the look that had haunted me since we first met. I hesitated, unsure if I should approach or simply pretend this was all a trick of the light. But something inside urged me forward. Our eyes locked again, and she gave a small, tentative smile, this time warmer, less fragile. I moved closer and asked if the seat across from her was taken. No, she said softly, her voice a little huskier than I remembered. There was a vulnerability beneath her calm, a hint of hesitation that tugged at me. I sat down, feeling the quiet thrill of proximity, the space between us charged, yet delicate. Our conversation started cautiously, light and polite. We talked about the book she was reading, the kind of weather that made days feel slower, the small details of daily life. But beneath those simple exchanges, there was a current of something deeper, an unspoken curiosity and a longing for connection. I noticed how she listened, really listened, with a careful attentiveness that made me feel seen in a way that was rare. Her eyes never wavered from mine, as if she was searching for the truth in my words, or maybe in the spaces I left unsaid. When she laughed, it was soft and genuine, a sound that settled warmly in the room like a quiet melody. At one point, our hands brushed as we both reached for the sugar jar. The touch was brief but electric, like a spark caught between us. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. Instead, we both lingered there, caught in the fragile balance between restraint and desire. I noticed how she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so natural yet intimate. The faint scent of her perfume, the same delicate jasmine, seemed to wrap around me, grounding the moment in something real and tender. There was something unspoken in the way she sat close, but didn't quite close the distance, like she was protecting a part of herself while simultaneously inviting me in. It was a dance of vulnerability and strength, of cautious hope and quiet fear. As we parted that afternoon, I realized this was more than just a chance meeting. It was the beginning of something that neither of us fully understood yet, a fragile thread weaving our lives together, slowly, carefully, with all the tenderness and tension of something waiting to bloom. And as she walked away, I caught one last glance, one filled with hesitant promise, and I knew this unexpected conversation was the first step toward a connection neither of us was ready to name, but both of us could feel that a few days after that fleeting glance. I found myself stepping into a small cafe I hadn't noticed before. The kind of place where the scent of roasted coffee beans mingled with the soft murmur of quiet conversations, and sunlight spilled in lazily through tall windows. It was a refuge from the city's relentless pace, a momentary pause in the world's clamor. And there she was, seated alone by the window, her presence somehow familiar yet entirely new. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes held that same depth I remembered, confident, yet shadowed by something fragile. She was reading a book, but the way she looked up when I entered felt like a ripple through still water, a subtle disturbance, drawing me in. Our eyes met again, and that impossible look returned, the one where she seemed to be questioning the reality of my presence. I hesitated, wondering if I should simply walk away, but the pull was too strong. She noticed, gave a small, inviting smile, and I found myself moving toward her table. "May I join you?" I asked, voice quieter than I expected. "No," she said, her tone warm but reserved. "I'd like that." Sitting across from her, I felt a curious mix of nervousness and calm, like standing at the edge of something unknown, beautiful, and fragile. We started with small talk, the kind that felt safe yet tentative. She told me about the book she was reading, the way the words painted quiet scenes of a life she seemed to long for. I spoke of things ordinary, the weather, the slow shift of seasons, but beneath the surface, something deeper was unfolding. I noticed the way she listened, not just hearing my words, but truly absorbing them, her eyes reflecting a quiet intensity that made me feel unexpectedly seen. There was a softness in her expression when she smiled, as if she was surprised by the comfort growing between us. At one point, our hands brushed lightly as we both reached for the sugar jar. The brief contact was electric, sending a gentle warmth through my skin. She didn't pull away. Instead, our fingers lingered, suspended in a delicate moment of connection. Her movements were graceful. The way she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, the faint scent of jasmine that seemed to follow her, subtle but intoxicating. It was these small details that anchored the moment in reality, making it feel intimate without words. We sat close, yet there was a respectful space between us, a silent acknowledgement of boundaries, hesitations, and the unspoken question of what this might mean. It was a dance of vulnerability and strength, where neither of us rushed forward, but both were drawn nearer. When the conversation ended and she stood to leave, I felt a sudden reluctance, as if I wanted to hold on to that fragile connection just a little longer. She gave me one last look, that same look of quiet disbelief, mingled with hope, before slipping away into the city's flow. That afternoon marked more than just an unexpected meeting. It was the first thread woven between two lives, a gentle beginning that promised something more, something neither of us yet dared to name, but both quietly hoped for. After that first unexpected conversation, the connection between us began to grow, not in grand declarations or sweeping gestures, but in the small, quiet moments that felt both ordinary and profound. We started meeting with gentle regularity, nothing planned, just chance encounters that turned into intentional meetings. Walks through the park became our favorite escape, where the world seemed to slow down just enough for us to breathe together. I noticed the subtle changes in her, the way the tension in her shoulders eased when she was with me, how her smiles became less guarded, more genuine. There was a softness in her presence that I hadn't seen before, a vulnerability she allowed only in the space we shared. Sitting side by side on a weathered bench, the crunch of fallen leaves beneath our feet, she would sometimes rest her hand lightly on my arm. It was a touch that felt like a whisper, a quiet reassurance rather than a demand. One evening, we watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and lavender. She leaned just a little closer, her shoulder brushing against mine, and I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The scent of her perfume mixed with the cool evening air, creating a memory I wanted to hold on to. These moments weren't filled with words. Often, we sat in companionable silence, simply sharing the comfort of presence. I noticed the steady rhythm of her breath, the slight rise and fall of her chest as she relaxed beside me. There was a language spoken without speech, a glance, a sigh, the gentle graze of fingers against skin. She told me stories, not always about herself, but about the things that had shaped her, a favorite childhood place, a book that changed her perspective, a melody that lingered in her mind. And with each story, I felt layers of her unfolding, strength mixed with sorrow, hope tempered by past disappointments. At times, her eyes would cloud with memories she didn't voice aloud, and I would find myself wanting to reach out, to offer comfort. But I knew trust was something she gave slowly, and I waited patiently, knowing that the deepest bonds are built on gentle care and quiet understanding. There was an intimacy in these slow, deliberate moments, a feeling that we were creating a space where both of us could be seen, truly seen, without fear or judgment. It wasn't about rushing toward anything. It was about learning to hold each other's presence with kindness and respect. One afternoon, as we parted after a long walk, her fingers brushed briefly against mine, so slight it might have been accidental, yet it lingered in my skin. It was a promise, unspoken but clear. This connection, fragile as it was growing stronger with every quiet step we took together. In those quiet moments, I realized that this slow-burning warmth between us was something rare. It wasn't loud or urgent, but steady and true. And I found myself wanting to protect it, to nurture it, knowing that sometimes the deepest love starts in the softest silence. As the days passed, our connection deepened in ways both thrilling and quietly unsettling. Beneath the warmth of our growing closeness, I sensed the shadow of hesitation, an unspoken tension that neither of us wanted to fully acknowledge. It was as if we both knew there was something standing just beyond the horizon, something that made the path uncertain and fragile. The age difference between us, never spoken aloud, loomed like a silent presence in the room. She carried the grace and confidence that comes from years of life experience, while I was still discovering the contours of my own. It wasn't just numbers or appearances. It was the stories etched into her eyes, the wisdom in her pauses, and the memories that lingered like quiet ghosts beneath her calm. I watched her sometimes, noticing how she pulled back when a difficult thought crossed her mind. Her smile would falter, just for a moment, as if wrestling with fears she couldn't voice. And I felt my own doubts creeping in, questions about what others might think, whether we could really bridge the gap between our worlds. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying our conversations, wondering if my feelings were enough, or if I was simply chasing an illusion. I felt a cautious pull toward her, but also a fear of causing pain, hers or my own. I knew she had been hurt before, that trust was a fragile thing for her, and the thought of being the cause of new wounds made me hesitate. She, too, seemed to wrestle with these fears. I caught glimpses of vulnerability in the way she sometimes withdrew, the subtle distance in her eyes when we spoke about the future. It was as if she was guarding a secret place inside herself, a part she wasn't ready to share yet. The strength she showed in public masked a quiet struggle between desire and restraint, hope and doubt. Our conversations grew more tentative, the spaces between our words heavier. There was a hesitation in her voice, a reluctance to dive too deeply into what we both felt but feared to name. The tension was palpable, not a barrier but a fragile thread stretched tight, ready to snap if pulled too hard. And yet, even in this hesitation, there was a strange beauty. It was a testament to how deeply we cared, how precious and rare this connection was that neither of us wanted to risk recklessness. The pauses, the silences, they spoke volumes about the care we were taking to protect what was growing between us. One evening, as we sat side by side in a quiet room, I reached out instinctively, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away, but her eyes searched mine, silently asking if we were ready to take the next step or if we needed more time. That moment was filled with all the unsaid fears and hopes between us. We both understood then that love, especially one that defies easy explanation or social expectations, requires patience. It needs room to breathe, to grow at its own pace. And while the road ahead was uncertain, the tenderness in that moment promised that we were willing to face the doubts together, one careful step at a time. The air between us was thick with everything left unsaid, the quiet hesitations, the guarded emotions, the invisible walls built from years of doubt and caution. We had danced around our feelings long enough, but that evening, something shifted. It wasn't a grand confession or a dramatic declaration. It was a simple, tender moment that broke through the barriers we had both carefully constructed. We were sitting together in her living room, the soft glow of a lamp casting gentle shadows on the walls. Outside, the city buzzed quietly, but inside, the world had narrowed down to just the two of us. She had shared something deeply personal, a memory wrapped in vulnerability, a fear she rarely voiced aloud. Her voice trembled slightly, and I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I didn't need words to respond. Instead, I reached out slowly, my hand brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The movement was deliberate but gentle, like a quiet promise not to hurt, not to rush. My fingers lingered near her temple, tracing the curve of her cheekbone with a softness that spoke louder than anything I could say. Her breath hitched in that moment, and I felt the tension in her body begin to ease, just a little, as if my touch was a balm to the walls she had built so carefully. Her eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they held a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something new, a tentative trust that dared to hope. I moved my hand down to cover hers, holding it lightly in mine. The warmth of her skin seeped into me, grounding the moment in a shared vulnerability. It was a touch that wasn't about possession or urgency, but about connection, a silent communication that said, "I see you. I'm here." She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled slowly around mine, and for a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. The quiet hum of the city, the ticking of the clock, even the soft flicker of the lamp, all faded into the background as we sat there, hands entwined, hearts cautiously opening. The room felt charged yet safe, a sacred space where fear and hesitation could coexist with hope and tenderness. It was in that delicate balance that something shifted inside us both. The barriers began to crumble, not with force, but with patience and care. Her head tilted slightly, resting against my shoulder, and I could feel the steady beat of her heart through the thin fabric of her blouse. The scent of jasmine wrapped around us, mingling with the quiet intimacy of the moment. It was a fragile, beautiful thing, a first step into a deeper kind of closeness. There was no rush, no need to define or label what was happening. This moment of tenderness was enough, a promise that we could be vulnerable, that we could lean on each other without fear. As we sat there, hand in hand, I realized that love doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes, it's found in the quiet breaking down of walls, in the gentle touch that says, "You are not alone." And in that moment, I knew we were ready to face whatever came next, together. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension that neither of us dared to break. There was a magnetic pull between us, a longing that hovered in every glance, every breath, yet remained unspoken, carefully held in the space that separated us. We spent time together, sometimes in the gentle stillness of a late afternoon walk, other times sitting side by side in a cafe, the hum of the world fading into a soft backdrop. But even in those moments of closeness, a subtle distance lingered, like a delicate thread stretched taut between two hearts afraid to cross the line. She would look at me with those wide, searching eyes, her gaze filled with questions and quiet desire, yet her hands would remain folded in her lap, hesitant to reach out. I, too, found myself yearning to close the gap, longing to brush my fingers against hers, to feel the warmth of her skin pressed lightly against mine, but I held back, respecting the fragile space she seemed to need. There was a sacredness in that silent yearning, a recognition that sometimes love grows strongest in the pauses, in the tension between touch and restraint. The world around us seemed to slow down. Each glance and gesture weighted with meaning, as if we were both waiting for the right moment to bridge the distance. One evening, we sat close on a worn leather couch in her softly lit living room. The amber glow of a single lamp cast gentle shadows, outlining the curve of her cheek, the gentle rise and fall of her breath. I noticed the way her hair fell over her shoulder, the subtle scent of jasmine wrapping around us like a quiet promise. She reached for a shared scarf, a soft woolen thing that had somehow become ours, and wrapped it loosely around both our shoulders. The fabric was warm, but it was the closeness it created that filled the room with an almost tangible energy. Our bodies were near, yet still just out of reach. Our shoulders brushed ever so lightly, sending a shiver down my spine, but neither of us moved closer. Instead, we held that fragile space, letting the unspoken desires fill the room without pressure or haste. In that silent yearning, there was an honesty that words could never capture. The truth of two souls slowly learning to trust, to hope, and to want each other without fear. It was a delicate dance, one step forward, one step back, both afraid to fall but unwilling to let go. I caught her eye once more, and in that glance was a shared understanding, an acknowledgement that the space between us was not a barrier, but a bridge, waiting to be crossed when the time was right. And so we waited, holding the silence like a treasure, knowing that some loves are meant to simmer, to build in the quiet spaces before finally bursting into flame. In the stillness of that night, as the city's distant lights flickered beyond the window, I felt the promise of what could be, a love slow and steady, fragile and fierce, waiting patiently in the space between us. The quiet tension that had woven itself between us over time began to ease, not with grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but with a simple, profound moment of closeness that said everything without words. It was as if the universe had finally granted us permission to step into the space we had both longed for but feared to enter. We found ourselves sitting together on the worn sofa in her living room, an ordinary place transformed by the weight of what was unfolding. The soft glow of the lamp cast a gentle halo around her, illuminating the delicate lines of her face, the quiet strength behind her eyes. She looked at me then, not with disbelief or hesitation, but with a calm certainty that made my heart ache in the best way possible. Slowly, without haste, she rested her head lightly on my shoulder. It was the kind of touch that spoke of trust and acceptance, a gesture so simple, yet filled with the warmth of 1,000 unspoken promises. Her breath was soft against my skin, steady and reassuring, as if saying, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." I wrapped my arm around her, careful and tender, feeling the softness of her against me. The warmth of her presence settled deep inside, melting away the lingering doubts and fears we had carried for so long. There was no need to say anything. The quiet closeness said everything we needed to hear. In that moment, the years between us, our differences, our hesitations, felt insignificant. What mattered was the bond we had forged, fragile but fierce, built on patience and understanding. I could feel the steady beat of her heart against my chest, a rhythm that matched my own, steady and sure. The room was still, save for the gentle rustle of fabric and the slow, even breaths we shared. Outside, the city hummed with life, but inside, time seemed to pause, a sacred bubble where only we existed. It was a quiet victory over uncertainty, a soft embrace of something unexpected yet undeniably real. As her fingers found mine, our hands entwined naturally, a silent affirmation of the journey we had taken together. It was a connection rooted in respect, tenderness, and the deep, slow-burning affection that had blossomed between us. She lifted her head just enough to meet my gaze, her eyes shining with a warmth that felt like home. No words were needed. Her smile, gentle and sure, carried the promise of all the tomorrows we would share. In that embrace, I understood that love is not always a storm. Sometimes, it is a quiet flame that grows stronger in the calm. It is patience, trust, and the courage to be vulnerable. We had come a long way from that first glance. two strangers connected by a look that seemed impossible. Now, we were here, together, ready to face whatever came next, hand in hand, hearts open. And as the night deepened around us, wrapped in the comfort of each other's presence, I knew that this slow, steady love, was exactly where we were meant to be.